Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the AIA Las Vegas February member meeting. This year, our focus is on the urgent issue of climate change and how architects are uniquely positioned to help solve it. Last month, Martha Madem, principal of Letty Madem Stacy Architects in San Francisco, encouraged us all to do one thing. Do the one thing that you can do to move your firm forward in working to combat climate change. The video of that presentation is available on our YouTube channel, accessed through the AIA Las Vegas website. So if you weren't here for that one, you can see that. Tonight's presentation will be videotaped also and will be made available to you via the website. So you might want to make notes and then go back and check what our speaker, Tate Walker, is going to share with us tonight. Tate is a lead fellow and director of sustainability at OPN Architects in Madison, Wisconsin. He is the original author of the Code Top 10 and now has been adopted by AIA National as the framework for design excellence. And he will provide an in-depth exploration into each of the measures and how we can integrate them into your practice. This presentation, as I said, is also being videotaped, so that'll be available to you as well. But at this moment, I am honored to introduce the 2020 president of the Las Vegas chapter, Lance Kirk, AIA.
Thank you, Randy. So I want to say thank you to everybody for being here tonight, to start with that. I really appreciate you guys coming out on a Wednesday night, taking your time, so thank you. And to start, we want to start by thanking our sponsors for 2020. And with that, I'll start with our visionary sponsors, which are Bergman Walls and Associates, John A. Martin and Associates, Clyde Jubewald Architecture plus Interiors, and KNIT. And if anybody is here, could you please stand up from any of these companies I mentioned? I'd love to see you here. Thank you, guys. We really appreciate it. And as I continue to read through these, please stand up as I call your company name. And our platinum sponsors are Nevada Sales Agency, Harris Consulting Engineers, TJK Consulting Engineers, Nevada Lighting, and of course 501 Studios with Levi here, our official photographer. So if there's anybody here with our platinum sponsors, please stand up. And our gold sponsors, ARIA Landscape Architecture, American Insurance and Investment Corp., Insurance Limited, Locksaw Engineering, Southwick Landscape Architects, and Terp Consulting. So please stand up for your, thank you. Thank you, Anna. And our silver sponsors, which are Bank of Nevada, Core Construction, Helix Electric, JLLP Inc., LGA Architecture, NV5, Pogemeyer Design Group, Silverlands Inc., SR Construction, and EPG Design. Thank you, everybody. Please stand up. So as you know, our focus this year is on climate change. Our theme is taking action to transform the practice of architecture. And we have objectives for 2020. These are important here, and you'll see these kind of repeated. You saw them last month as well. They are to build a generation of architectural experts to be leaders on climate change, to train design professionals on high-performance buildings, skill sets, and best practices that will be required in the next decade. We need to demonstrate skills and abilities to act on this. And we need to work with policymakers to set standards to reduce and eliminate carbon emissions, lead and support the adoption of the Zero Code in Las Vegas and at the state level, and increase the number of Nevada firms who support and participate in the AI 2030 commitment. Happy to say this keeps going up, so I've been watching it. We had 4, we were down to 1, and now we're back up around 6 or so. I think Rick's joined in the last month, so thank you, Rick. And if there's been any other people who've joined, please let us know, but we need to continue to push that and get people to support that. So we will bring national speakers, workshops, and educational opportunities to our community. Additionally, we are preparing our members in the community to better understand how buildings contribute to climate change, develop expertise to lead, and demonstrate the skills and abilities to tackle climate change. And that's why we're bringing speakers like Tate here today. Designing and building resilient buildings in the near future is not an option anymore. It's of vital importance to our climate, community, and our profession. So with this, of course, we had Marcia Mayhem. She was here upper left last month. Tate is here with us today, talk about the framework for design excellence. We are going to have the zero code discussion coming up in the next few months. We're working on putting some workshops together for the AI 2030. So you'll see those in the summertime. And then we're hoping to conclude towards the end with more speakers with Ed Mesri and additional speakers. So tonight, I'm honored to have, introduce Tate Walker to you. Tate and I go back about, from the mid-2000s. We worked together on a COAT committee and got to know each other about 15 years ago when I was pretty heavily involved with COAT and with the AI National Regional Committee. I believe you were on one as well. So Tate is the Director of Sustainability at OPN Architects and leads projects and initiatives across the firm's 4 offices. His experience is rooted in the architecture design process, but also includes programs and project management and the development of technical guidelines and high-performance buildings. So Tate Walker joined the contributing team as a project co-lead for the COAT Top 10 Toolkit, which was released in June of 2018. The toolkit is a resource accessible to all architects, designed to provide relevant general guidelines to architects, incorporating principles of sustainability in projects. A number of independent studies identified patterns to develop top 10 measures, and the most relevant current resources to support them were curated by the team. The next phase of the toolkit is due out soon, I believe. So, and Tate is also, I think this year, hopefully he'll talk a little bit. He's now on the co-chair for the AI 2030. That is organization for AIA, so a new direction with that. He's past president of AI Wisconsin and past AG as well for the COAT committee. So he's got a lot of experience there, and this is how I got to know him. But please help me welcome and bring Tate to the stage.
Thank you so much for having me out. I'm a serial volunteer. Now that you read all those positions back to me, I think I might need to cut back a little. Thank you guys. It's such a warm welcome, and it's so wonderful to be here following Marcia Madem. She was such a great leader as the head of the COAT organization last year and made so much change, and she lifted everyone up along with her. She spoke highly of you and the passion that this chapter has, and hopefully we won't have all of the same slides, but I'll just be reinforcing a lot of the messages that she shared with you when she came to visit. So thanks a lot, and I just, you heard a lot about me, possibly too much, but I did want to introduce you to my firm and who I work for. OPN Architects is about 110, and we have 4 offices in the Midwest, in Wisconsin and Iowa, and I'm in Minnesota. Yeah, it's a great place to work. We care about design deeply. And the thing I'd like to do here is, rather than just tell you, we had a video that if I could have a little help with, that would be awesome. Here it comes. I'll just let the video speak.
There was this sound of rushing water coming in, and I'm looking at our model shop, which is now partially a flotilla, and then 30-some years of archives of all of our work. We were ordered to evacuate the building. There's no one I could call. There was nothing you could do but just leave.
Cedar Rapids is overrun by an unimaginable amount of water, and the Cedar River is taking with it anything it can as floodwaters continue to rise.
As an architectural practice, we could think more openly, more creatively about what we wanted to become as a community, as a downtown.
One of the first kind of profound moments for me was the Theater Cedar Rapids rebirth. It was one of those buildings nobody thought would flood.
Whether it was on the wall or the seats, it was noticeable where the water had been. They knew as an architect what we wanted to accomplish, but they were also there in those meetings, knew that classroom space was important to us. They knew an expanded lobby was important to us.
We created a black box theater in the lower level where they do more experimental things. That night of opening night, they had like the greatest performance ever. And it was just, it's one of those moments where you're glad you were in the audience to be there to witness it.
By the time the flood actually hit, the damage to the library was just tragic. Instead of just looking at what we had before and saying we're going to rebuild that.
How could we do it better, stronger, more vibrant than we could conceive a library? It's not just a place to go find a book or a movie, but it's a place to socialize, it's a place to grab coffee, it's a place to hang out with friends, to have community events.
We've built a space that people love, and it's a space that they use. That is the silver lining to everything that we had to go through to get here.
Right after the flood, I actually came downtown. I got to the Paramount Theater, I walked inside, and I literally started crying. I mean, this building was built in the early 1900s.
And it's being used to bring in Broadway shows and rock concerts. But it didn't do any of those very well because it wasn't designed to those requirements. We were able to vacate the alley behind the building so we could make the stage 20 feet deeper.
Tested about 1,200 points in the theater, and then designed this 4-stage reflector to basically disperse the sound perfectly. The chandeliers were completely restored, the carpet was completely restored, everything was repainted.
People who had bought season tickets of Orchestra Iowa for decades said they heard instruments, notes, sounds out of the orchestra they'd never heard before because the acoustics allowed you to hear the music. To have the opportunity to participate in your community in a recovery from such an extraordinary event, not everybody gets to do that. We did.
Great. Thanks. So those are the folks I work with, and obviously I couldn't convey that kind of emotion in front of you tonight, so thanks for letting me show the movie. I think it really speaks to a few things. First of all, the power of design and sustainability when they work together, in this case, towards resilience. And secondly, despite all the disasters we're seeing and all the harm, that we really have the ability to show what a good future looks like and get people to buy into it, get consensus, and actually build it. And that's one of the reasons I like practicing so much, especially where I do. These people have been through it, and they believe in what they do passionately. So, yeah, I think he's working on pulling the slides back up. But that's kind of where I come from. Okay, so now you know the story of Cedar Rapids. When they built it back, they really integrated LEED and sustainability in a lot of the major civic buildings. And this culminated in a really vibrant downtown, one that wasn't there before, which has just grown over time and really exciting to see. In fact, we got a National Leadership Award at the USGBC for this work, and they wanted to highlight, what you can do in a small town in a town that's not a wealth island, but certainly it has a heart, and I think that's what most cities want and most cities need. So, so yeah, that was a good story. How are we doing on those slides? It was 2008, and it wiped out about 500 blocks of downtown. You know, it was just a crazy amount of rain coming on, you know, just nothing could have possibly handled it. It went way over the 500-year flood stage, which has been interesting for us to have these conversations after the fact and really talk about what are we going to do differently to prevent this kind of thing from happening. You know, and it's been 12 years now, and they're still rebuilding. So it's been really interesting experiencing that, and yeah. So maybe I'll do an interpretive dance of my slides. Well, so, okay. Who I am, who my firm is. I know the least of anybody in this room about Las Vegas. So I need to apologize for that. But I think what I can do tonight is provide the framework for you to think about what the vision is for your space, for your culture, for Nevada. And that's really the brilliance of the framework. It's a visioning tool. It asks open-ended questions. It invites you to come and you know, explore the possibilities, right? It's not a checklist. It's very different. It's how I work every day with my clients. You know, you you're forced to interview on these projects. You don't have much context. You have the website. You talk to a few folks. You have a general picture of what they might like, but when you start asking questions and engaging them, you find out so much about what motivates them. That's really what underpins the framework and why it works so well. That's kind of that. Now, since I don't have my slides, what I'll do is I will just give you a quick recap of how we got to now. So COAT is 30 years old this year. It's 2020, so it was in 1990 it started. 20 plus years old is the COAT Awards, and these are these top 10 awards. So they've been around a long time, and they got great presence out there in the market. So it gets picked up by National Geographic, it gets picked up Wired, it goes way beyond the architectural community. And it's really exciting to kind of see people engage with these types of buildings. And in 2017, what we did was a full overhaul of the COAT measures. And we kept some, we changed others, and we completely replaced others. You know, there's stuff that has come into practice within the last 5 years, like wellness, that just wasn't there that long ago. A lot of the research that is supporting it is new, and we really wanted to give people a holistic, very up-to-the-minute picture of what good design was like. So in doing that, the other thing that I was partially responsible for was to go in and quantify all the measures and attach numbers to them. How do we say we're doing this and measure it? So in doing that, that sort of showed me a couple of things that I wanted to change. First of all, architects weren't good with numbers. We really needed to work on our math, which probably wasn't a huge surprise, but giving people a context to know, like, is this good? Is this bad? You know, is this a really high-performing building, or have we got like a Hummer here? What's going on? The other thing was that buildings were being built, and then this award criteria was being applied at the end of a process, which kind of worked, but wouldn't it be great if we use it as a design driver at the beginning of a process? Yes, that's okay. Do we need a password? Oh, it's the copy of 2020 Las Vegas. Is that right? This is gonna be awesome. I'm really looking forward to this. I knew that video was gonna be a problem coming in here, but yeah, thanks for sticking with me, fellas. I appreciate it. So we overhauled it, and there's this problem, right? 10 projects win every year, hundreds of projects submit. You know, we weren't telling the story of what we're doing as you know, as a profession. And there were some really great projects in there that were getting lost or could just use a little help to get to the next level. So that's kind of where this toolkit idea came about. And the toolkit got built. You know all about it because you've been there. And thank you very much. Woohoo! All right. Thank you. So the toolkit was there to kind of show the best practices, show the research, show the exemplary projects out there, who's doing this really well, so that you could really implement it on your day-to-day work. And that was great. It really took off. It got a lot of hits. It was just like a non-funded PDF on the AIA website. And for some reason, they picked it up. They turned it into an actual like website, and then last year the resolution for urgent and sustained action on climate change came around, and then they took this thing that we had done and they made it into the framework for design excellence. So it's no longer for, you know, a small section of practicing people. It's, you know, for all 100,000 architects, and it's gone way beyond that, in fact, as well. And I'll try and give you some examples, but that's kind of where we are now with this framework for design excellence. And now we're looking forward. How does it need to change? How does it need to get better to support what you guys are doing every day? All right. Thanks for that detour. So, the world's changing. There's a lead credit for building air quality monitoring, and it usually costs somewhere north of $10,000. It's a one-time deal. You go in, you measure the air quality, you get a report, and you're done. Now there's like a $20 Foobot device that you can put on your desk. It measures air quality across 8 dimensions and reports it continuously throughout the day. So what I'm saying is we can no longer get away with it. If we're delivering buildings with bad air quality, there's no place to hide anymore. So taking these issues seriously and using the tools that we have to deliver better buildings is an imperative. O-Power is a great story. It's all about transparency and the ability of information to affect behavior change, to really propel you forward. In this case, you know, this poor sap has a really poor performing home compared to the average and super efficient homes. And we found that more than any other thing out there, including incentives, peer pressure works the best at moving people towards efficiency. So this is a great kind of example of this happening outside of architecture. On long-haul flights, you're starting to see circadian lighting, right? So when you take off, it's tuned to the city where you're landing, and then it goes through its cycles, and when you land, you're feeling less jet lag, which is something I wish I had on my flight today. Our friend Elon Musk, here he is holding up a MERV like 15 filter in his Tesla. And we've been doing this for years on buildings, but I haven't seen us selling it that hard. He's got a situation where if you press a button, I think it's called biohazard mode in the Tesla, you can turn on this super filtration system. And if somebody drops a dirty bomb in your city, you're very safe in your car in terms of the air quality. But the practical application of this is that, you know, with all the fires in California, air quality in your car is actually better than the air quality outside. And the opportunity for us to take this technology and apply it past commercial buildings and into homes and residences is really exciting. And again, it's all about the outcomes that we want to see from our designs and how we get there. You all recognize Greta. She's been a galvanizing force, and certainly I could not do this slide presentation without her. So the youth are demanding it, and if they're demanding it, it's very hard for leadership to say no. And so what I'm seeing now is all the stars aligning. I'm seeing an organization that, you know, we've been working really hard on this for many years, kind of finally fully embrace it and shift resources to promoting it. And I think it's the same in my chapter, and from talking with Lance, from talking to UNLV students today, it's the same here. So we're all in this space together, and you know, I encourage us to lean on each other to get better. We don't need to seek relevance, right? We only need to grasp it. It's in the headlines every single day. Yeah, it's a really exciting time to be alive. So thanks for having me to Las Vegas. These are your action points, but I won't go over these because Lance had way better slides. I got this off the internet, so it wasn't all that good. But I like to see the progress you guys are making. You all remember the framework for design excellence? Super simple, 10 things. In all the years I've been practicing, I haven't found a concept that doesn't fit within one of these 10 buckets. That is really powerful. When you can simplify something down so concisely, it really helps it kind of when it comes to the implementation phase. People don't forget it. And that's one of the greatest strengths of this tool. Because when you look at all the possible things you can do out there within sustainability, within architecture, it's just an incredibly huge list. And people can't make sense of it. But this framework really, really does that. So rather than go into each one of the measures, I was going to kind of talk a little bit about what concepts we use to develop the framework, and then go into a project that I use in my own practice and how it applies to the framework. Sound good? Awesome. I want to make this relevant for you. So by architects, for architects, there are a lot of things out there that are geared towards everyone on the design team, the contractor, the civil engineer, the structural engineer, you know, and it becomes really difficult to see like what you're responsible for. So when we took this perspective, like what's within the scope of the architect? What are we responsible for? What can we do to make our buildings better? So that was a really important component. And then when we did this, We had 10 or 12 co-authors, and then I led this with Corey Squire in the lower left-hand corner and Helena Zambrano. And what's really interesting is, there were all firm sizes, all different parts of the country. But I think if you can do this in the Midwest, this will walk and work anywhere you want, right? It is not the California, definition of sustainability. This is something that you can do anywhere, and I think that's really unique about it as well. But we also went through 3 intense peer reviews with over 60 contributors. So these are subject matter experts from across the Institute, and it really provides a lot of backup for the recommendations that we made as best practices, as research. Yeah, it's super up to date, and some really smart people worked on it. Possibly some of you in the room. Anybody? No? Okay. Obviously, my outreach skills aren't as good as I thought. So, lead with a vision instead of a checklist. We've all been in that space where you go into the room, somebody whips out a checklist, and then everybody goes to sleep for the next 2 hours. It's not a visioning session. It's not something that people will get excited about. And, when you use the framework in this way and you ask these open questions, it really illuminates what's important to the client, what the opportunities are, what the strengths are, what the biggest environmental footprints are, and then you can apportion your resources appropriately. It's just good design. And I love this quote at the bottom by Paul Hawkins. I think it's really kind of influenced how I think about climate change particularly. Good management is the art of making problems so interesting and their solutions so constructive that everyone wants to get to work and deal with them, right? Too often climate change is too technical, it's too scary, it's overly moral, it's political, but I think when you look really deeply at the problems, some interesting solutions begin to emerge. And they really, really engage you when it comes to design. And so what are those things what are those bright spots? What are those simple things that we can do to make a difference? You guys might remember Lisa Heschong of Heschong Mahone Group, Thermal Delight in Architecture, which is arguably one of the senses. Visual is kind of the dominant sense that we use in architectural design, but it's also the most distant. What if we engaged all the senses in design? It really brings a whole new level to discovery and richness to our buildings. And so we try to do that within the measures. We certainly don't expect you to do all the measures. It's not something that, is going to work for every building. You need to find what's meaningful and it matters to your project. This is Kieran Timberlake's office. Their big question was, could we operate an office in this 100-year-old bottling plant with only natural ventilation? And will people be comfortable? And the answer was no. But they were incredibly brave, and they shared their story, and it certainly deserves recognition and award. And it's not just a bunch of pretty pictures. There are narratives. There are links to the software they use to measure these things. It's all on the COAT website where they've detailed their approach. So it's really a leadership position, and I'm really glad to say Billy Faircloth, who's their leader of research, is just coming on the National COAT Advisory Group this year. So pretty exciting. And then as architects, it's always too much stuff. There's never enough time to do everything. So the resource was built with time in mind. Buildings are built with 2x4s at 16 inches on center. You don't do a structural model to understand if like 18.3 inches is the most efficient. You just do the best practice and you know it's not going to fall down, and it's going to be reasonably efficient, and you move on, right? And that's kind of the thought process we use behind developing the framework. You do these few things and you move on, and you spend your time where it matters most. And most people just don't have that resource. They don't have that person in the office to give it to them, and certainly not for all the measures. So it's really built as a time-saving device. And I love this quote too, and I'm sorry I'm reading so much tonight, but I think this is really powerful. In the past, censorship worked by blocking the flow of information. In the 21st century, censorship works by flooding people with irrelevant information. People just don't know what to pay attention to, and they often spend their time investigating and debating side issues. In ancient times, having power meant having access to data. Today, having power means knowing what to ignore. Are we like unconsciously censoring ourselves by overloading us with information? I can say that's definitely true for me. I don't know about you guys, but this really, it highlight the need for a toolkit within my own practice as well, which is, I think, a microcosm of the larger profession. You guys recognize these buildings? Yeah. A lot of nodding heads, right? So absolutely beautiful, transformational design, way, important in the 21st century. The Empire State Building and the Aqua Tower in Chicago. But did you know what the EUI was, right? So it's form and its function. Right? And so often we obsess about form, we do not bother to think about function. Design excellence is both, right? And we're no longer gonna accept a definition of just one. So this is really having a ripple effect throughout not only our firm, but with our clients, certainly with the profession as a whole. And there are a lot of great discussions coming out of this. Right. That was kind of why the drivers that we used behind developing the framework, but this is a project that we did in my own practice and how the framework kind of works on a day-to-day basis. So this is not Madison 14, this is Madison 13, and when we won the interview process, they said, hey guys, congratulations. We really love Fire Station 13. Can you do that, but just a little bit bigger in half the time? And we said, sure, yeah, absolutely. And then we went right into the workshop, and we questioned every assumption that they had. And we really kind of got to the heart of, what the big drivers were for the staff, for training, for community impact. And we use the framework to do that. So again, the questions are really simple. They're written right on the measures. We'd ask them and then develop a bulleted list or a short narrative in the visioning stage of a project. So the kickoff meeting, the very first thing. And this is what makes it a design tool. It's not a sustainability tool. It's just asking really, really good questions. And it illuminated a lot of things for us architects early on in the process that were so powerful they just carried throughout. So I was really pleased with the outcome there. They had a fleet of buildings, right? So we were able to go back in and measure other buildings within their fleet. And you can see this is like 2030 slide. So we've got the baseline over here of about 80 EUI, right, for a standard fire station. And then Station 11 used a little over 100. Station 12, less than 40 EUI. Station 13 is sub-20s. And then the target for 2030, which was 70% less than CBEX, was around 20. And our design was clocking in the low 20s. So by doing this research, this is deceptively simple, but it did a few things. First of all, it asked a lot of questions, right? What happened between 11 and 12? Well, it happened to be the city's first LEED building, and they'd never measured their energy before. But they actually got really good at this over time, and we encouraged them to go back and retro-commission Station 11 after this slide, too. So, but the other cool thing was we weren't just relying on national averages. We were looking at real, actual numbers of buildings and having, deeper discussions about lighting and controls and HVAC system and you name it. So it was a really great sort of process and worked right into the 2030 commitment. And we were able to say, yes, we can do these things. We can deliver them, at $300 a square foot, and then we've got the proof to do it. So it took a lot of risk out of the estimating process for our cost estimator, and for the contractors as well. So pretty exciting. These buildings are like cities. There's so many different parts that goes into a fire station. There's a gym, kitchen, dorms, office areas, community areas, apparatus bay, and taking those and assembling them in a way that made sense, that allowed them all to fit together, and then coming up with a simple diagram of how we wanted the station to work. So double height apparatus bay, single height living side, mechanical goes in the middle, and then a big slope roof connects the whole building together and faces south. So it's a perfect PV array. We have more than enough room to make a net zero building. So, just as a simple passive design concept, that kind of carried its way from early design sketches all the way through. Some of the other cool parts were racial equity, racial and social justice initiative that the city was doing. That fit right in with the measure designed for community, and they sort of mutually propelled each other. A lot of clients ask me, well, that's great. How'd that actually work out in the building? They actually changed their program. They got more money. They built a bigger station than they ordinarily would because there were no other civic presence in this neighborhood. So no way the neighborhood had any place to meet or connect. And so they enlarged the community space. It's bigger than the other stations, and it's been a win-win both for the fire station and the community. So that was really cool. The other thing we focused on was the air barrier, and you have these big diesel apparatus right next to people sleeping. So the continuity, the air tightness of the building was not only an energy issue, which it always is, especially in a cold climate like Wisconsin, it was a health issue as well. So we had a reasonable PV array, which was the first for the city. And I think the best outcome of this is, we just did the right thing at the beginning. We did our homework, and the building came in like around the right budget, around $300 a square foot, and it was just LEED platinum. It just kind of like falling off a boat. So if you do the right thing, it will line up with almost any rating system out there, whether you're going for well, LEED, or any of the other 500 choices you have. So in terms of the economics, this was a really simple graph that we did showing how the additional costs for the PV system and the high-performance systems were offset by incentives and first costs, and then the annual savings, which is around $1 a square foot, for a quick payback of 7 years. And if you took out the PV, it was almost 3 years. So super cost effective. This building was like north of 30 return on investment. So, I mean, I challenge you to find that with any other market asset out there. For health and safety, this was the wellness measure. Firefighters have 4 main issues they're dealing with. PTSD from first responder, that's a pretty serious issue. Shift work sleep disorder, right? So you're getting woken up in the middle of the night to respond to emergencies. There are really high rates of cancer. So from exposure to, carcinogens from burning buildings. And then also really high risk of coronary disease from stress from the job. So our challenge was, how are we going to address this with the building design? And elements of biophilia in the design, certainly color choice and pattern and textiles, tactile issues, but natural light was a big component as well, and views of nature. So yeah, there are a lot of like really powerful moves that aren't necessarily sustainable. They're just like really good design. So there's an early shot of the building in its massing phase. It went through a number of iterations, but we tried to kind of use those measures as a lens throughout the process. And then that was an early rendering. We tried to integrate art as a community aspect to showcase the pride the firefighters have for their work. And that's the final project. It completed almost a year ago, and it's tracking right around where we predicted. So it's a pretty good story. I mean, that's kind of the toolkit in action, right? And it's pretty simple. But for this client, it was particularly effective. They've gone through a couple of projects with the framework now, and you're starting to see it show up in their RFPs for services. They're asking for this. So if a client's asking for it, yeah, it works. Internally, having these conversations at the firm has really helped me as well. With 4 offices, with 110 employees, it's really hard to touch every project. And having a document that folks can go back to and reinforce what they know, a single source of truth, has been a game changer in terms of freeing up my time to do more important stuff, as opposed to like answering the same damn question about window performance like all the time. So in this slide, you can kind of see what looks like Swiss cheese. All firms have different capabilities, right? Firm 7 has like really no expertise at all in any of the measures. Firm 5, it has like really, really good expertise in most of the measures. And there's just sort of a whole gamut of folks out there. But the toolkit can really help fill those gaps in how your firm approaches the different measures. And it works both ways. So this is almost like a wiki, right? We're collecting these best practices from the field, and they're making it back into the toolkit. At the same time, the toolkit's making it back out into the world and really affecting practice so that we're all better. and all our holes are filled. These are the 10 measures, and it kind of shows how the measures are interrelated, right? So there's a lot of overlap. One of the hardest things with making something so simple, it's like Occam's razor. There's always something that doesn't fit. No taxonomy is like complete. Where do you stick carbon? Do you put it in community because of the transportation impacts? Do you put it in energy for operational carbon? Do you put it in materials for embodied carbon? No, it's something that cuts across all of the sections. And it really takes a professional to come in there and tease out, like, what's the most important, right? If we're asking the right questions, we can solve that equation for each unique project that's out there. And I think that's our greatest strength as architects. Talking to clients has been really successful for us. We've had a lot of luck. This is University of Wisconsin. They're an R1 research university in our backyard, about 40,000 students. They adopted the framework for themselves, and they actually tweaked it to kind of reflect their own values by adding design for learning and design for research. And I think that's the beauty of it. There's some flexibility in that. It's free, it's accessible, it's not written in technical terms, so even our clients who are generalists like ourselves can really sink their teeth into it. This has been really meaningful for us to see clients like force other firms to do this. So, state of Wisconsin, same thing. They found that their sustainability standards were somewhat light, and they started piloting these projects in the state to go along with the governor's mandate for zero net carbon by 2050. And what you're finding is a lot of states, a lot of cities, universities, they're making up for the gap that's happening nationally with leadership on these climate issues. So this is where we're seeing the real action. Again, this is right in our wheelhouse. This is where we work every day. We have an incredible opportunity to align ourselves around these things. And yeah, been good. Marsha probably told you about this awards alignment. I'm really proud to say that Wisconsin had just adopted this for our state awards. So they are asking for more than just pictures and narratives, but they're requiring some serious calculations. And yeah, it's really exciting. The Honor Awards has started to adopt these as well, and you're kind of seeing it filter throughout all the chapters. So we've got a long history, we've got some great design pedigree, and I really am excited about upping our game around these metrics. There's a common app which was developed to help mainstream these measures into the design process and really quickly see how you're doing in a dashboard sense. Payette was a really great example of this. A lot of you were at the convention last year, I would imagine, since it was here. So proud of these guys. These guys are really kicking ass. And I know I'm being filmed, and you can definitely not bleep that out. Yeah, so Payette, they won 2 awards and the Firm of the Year. They take 2030 seriously. It's a part of their culture there. Their pitch, their big idea was design and performance. It's really, really simple, but really hard to do. It created some tough conversations in the studio, and I think they were the first ones to get both the Committee on the Design and the Committee on the Environment to back their bid for Firm of the Year, and that was the only time that's ever been done in the history of the Firm of the Year award. So kudos to them, and a really great lesson for all of us in our practices every day to achieve that kind of excellence. AIA has been actively involved in improving our ethical guidelines and codes. They have Canon 6, which is obligations to the environment. This is the broad sort of vision for how architects should address issues of the environment. Ethical standards go into individual areas of that. And then there's the rule that members shall consider with their clients the environmental effects of their project decisions. And when I'm on the project, that's not an issue. It's when I'm not on the project is kind of what I'm trying to get some consistency around, right? And give people the tools to feel empowered to not only just do these things, but sell them with confidence. Because if you don't understand them, you're not gonna sell them. So giving people that fluency, if you will, has been really important in my practice. This is a terrible looking slide, but it's the future. So what it is here, you have AIA awards, you have the DDX, which is the Design Data Exchange that the 2030 uses to collect data on all your projects. You have the awards archive, you have these knowledge communities like Committee on Design, Committee on the Environment, Committee on Aging, Committee on, well, there are lots of committees. But they all go into this central unified project database. And when you track this data, you can easily pull it out, research it, compare it to other trends in the Institute, but also use it to support your award submissions as well, which we really think just by measuring it, people will understand what kinds of impacts their decisions are having. So this is a huge thing that's going on at the Institute right now. And as co-chair of the 2030 committee, we've instituted some major changes to the DDX this year. So not just looking at EUI, but breaking out on-site and off-site renewables, and then adding fields for embodied carbon. So yeah, we think that's going to be the next big step, and certainly it's right in the architect's wheelhouse. We need to start tracking it, and we need to start doing it yesterday, because we only got 10 years left, folks, to figure this out. So yeah, it's super exciting, and look for those resources soon. So I'm just going to wrap this up, and then we can have some questions. At one time, design excellence was defined in the era of Catholicism, like what design excellence was. Certainly in the era of technological optimism, I think that's the Seagram building there. In the era of computational possibilities, and then what design excellence is in the era of climate change. I think this has an incredible opportunity as a form giver for architecture and a meaningful practice. So thanks. I really appreciate your time. Cool. Yeah, the process gets ahead of us pretty fast. I've had the same issues. Yeah, I can't say that I have all the answers. There's a phenomenon that goes on in in my practice called "It's Too Early or It's Too Late." Yeah, like come back in a couple weeks, we just need to lock this down, and then you come back in a couple weeks, and it's like, oh, we already got it doing a glass box again, It's like, oh, come on, guys. So I have a firm belief that there's always something that you can do no matter what phase you're in, and just figuring that out and doing it is really, really important. It's not a technological challenge, it's a behavioral challenge. So, as long as you come at it with that mindset, I think we've developed this couple of things within the framework that are really powerful. One is, it's in the Common app, and it's a spider graph. And what you do is you take all the sort of 50 best practices, and you check off the ones that you're doing. You look at the spider graph, and you see where your strengths are, and then you spend your time on those strengths. And oh, we're doing great at water here. What are the things we need to do for water? And you dive deep on that water thing just for a few hours. The second thing I'd recommend is there's something called if you can only do one thing, or I think they came up with another name for it, high impact strategies. And it's like, okay, one thing that's gonna be multivalent, that's gonna hit it in a number of different ways. So, for example, don't use turf grass. This is gonna cut down on your maintenance. It's gonna cut down on your watering, your use of pesticides. It's gonna attract other fauna. It's gonna have multiple benefits just by doing one simple thing. Apologies to any landscape architects. I know it's way more complicated than that, but that's just a quick example. I hope that helps. One of the things we really didn't want to do was just get a list of like 500 resources and all the things, it's like, no, that's bullshit. You need a really concise, well-curated list that, you don't, when people come and ask me for the code book, they don't want the code book. They want an answer. And so that's what we tried to provide, an answer, a quick answer. Because, you get in that rut. It's like, hey, this is successful. If we want to, if we want to, like, make it out of here alive, we got to, commodify this a little bit, which I don't think is the wrong sentiment. But what we did for particularly energy is we broke it down from an architectural perspective. There's so much that's not in the architect's wheelhouse that's really, really important, but you can get lost in there. And benchmarking is certainly one of them. We use a Zero tool. It's a really quick tool, a couple of inputs, and then gives you that EUI baseline, what your target should be. And then we also use this one called EUI Analyzer, and it's super great. It's just a massive database that has sucked in all of these city benchmarking initiatives and NBI's net zero building database. And so you can look for a whole bunch of different parameters really quickly and just get a good spread of buildings and a lot of data. The 2030 research tab in the DDX is really great for that too, because you can see all your old projects and even other people's. So those are, benchmarking is like super simple, and it's not rocket science. I think you should be able to do a really solid benchmark in 15 minutes. And have some really robust conversations around it. EUI is great. It's a single number that defines the whole building. And I think people lose sight of the power of that, the importance of that. You can easily convey it to a client. I can convey it to my 10-year-old and he gets it, so I'm relatively sure the client will get it. I think people like tend to dismiss it because it is so simple. It's like, I want to see the end uses of my fan energy, and no, just give me the number, and then let's work from there. So from my perspective, that's a great foot in the door, and then you build competency over time such that all of a sudden people are doing really quick models and understanding, oh, are we in the range or are we out? And so we've been really successful at doing conceptual models using a lot of freeware. And that's the other thing we wanted to do with the toolkit was highlight the freeware that is out there, because we want accessibility to be the major component. Unfortunately, if you go free, it looks bad. If you pay money, it looks nice. But it's just as good. So, yeah. Climate consultants, it's been around for 20 years, but they keep getting better. It's really great. Yeah, so I know it's getting super late, and I don't want to take too much more time. Oh, how could I forget the super spreadsheet? Yeah, well, easily, apparently. So, y'all know about this? No? Okay. Well, I tried calling it the super ultra mega spreadsheet, but the AIA shot me down, and they just kept it to the super spreadsheet. In any case, what we did is we all have spreadsheets on the server somewhere, tracking materials, tracking energy, and so not only did we take everyone's spreadsheets, but we took the best parts and we put it into one spreadsheet. So it tracks all the measures, it has all of the metrics, it has reasonable ranges and benchmarked sources to know if you're good or bad. It has links to the origin of the data, and then it compiles it for you so you can see where your strengths are really, really quickly. The inputs are super simple, so it's not rocket science, but it definitely leads you on a path to good, better, best. And I think it's been great for us. The key is not to pick it up in SD, where you don't know anything yet, then you're just redoing it. I think it's nice to be a little further down the road before you start quantifying things, maybe DD, just to make sure you're not doing too much rework. But you have my contact information. It's on the AIA website. If you can't find it, just shoot me an email and we'll get you a copy. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the idea is to get some money behind it, develop it so it's a really robust web resource and not just a spreadsheet. So I think there's definitely some properties that were put into parkland and not built on again. There's some reinforcing around the river, Army Corps of Engineers came in, did some dredging, and raised the flood walls a little bit higher. There's certainly a greater awareness around stormwater and what that does in the region. So holding it on site, letting it evapotranspirate, cleaning it so it's not full of sediment before it does off run. And I haven't done a project where we didn't get exemplary points in LEED for just the basic stormwater stuff in Iowa. So it has really changed the regulatory structure, and certainly the DNR that helps kind of those things. So yeah. Does that answer your question? Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so just to complete tonight, thank you again for coming and spending a few hours with us. We really appreciate it. I know there's a lot of things that go on in the city, and so we appreciate your time. And so our next meeting is March 18th. I believe it'll be here. I think it's set up for that. So we're going to have a panel discussion. We're going to have a little different format. We're going to talking about what is Nevada doing? What is Clark County doing? What is the city of Las Vegas doing? What are we doing about climate change and how that affects all of us? So it'll be a very robust and interesting discussion. So please join us on the 18th back here. So again, thank you all for coming tonight. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next month.